The six-pack. Let's get to the reasons, the storylines, the people that are going to be important in this game, and can the Texans pull off a victory in this game on Saturday, tomorrow, 3:30. You can hear it here on Sports Radio 610. Texans countdown at 12:30. All right, the number one, you mentioned it in the open. We'll mention it again. I think is one of the biggest storylines of the game, the return of Azeez Al-Shaair. Here is D'Amico Ryans on Tuesday this week talking about how important Azeez Al-Shaair's leadership is.
Azeez has been a great vocal leader. He always shares a great message. He's great at articulating those messages to the players, and the players are very attentive when Azeez is talking. Right? When Azeez talks to the team, it always comes from the heart. It's heartfelt, it's sincere, and you can tell how much he cares about the guys just with his messages. So I know it resonates with the guys, and that's what a team is about, right? When your team leaders are standing up giving the messages, they go a lot further than what I have to say because they know my message don't change. It's the same thing from when we started at training camp to now. Like, we're going to be consistent in messaging from me and what I expect of our guys, because I believe in winning. It takes a certain way to win games, and that doesn't change right from day one to where we are now. So really thankful for Azeez and his leadership, thankful for CJ, Will, the guys who step up and lead when it comes to being vocal leaders. Like, you need that. You need guys to do it the right way, but at times players need to hear from each other, and it means a lot more when they do that. So we have a lot of guys who aren't afraid to speak up and speak their mind to each other and pour out their hearts to each other.
Yeah, veteran leadership is always a tricky thing, and you never know exactly what it's going to look like or who your good leaders are going to be. In the playoffs especially, it's really good to have a lot of older guys who have a kind of maturity about them. And Azeez isn't actually that old, but he's one of those guys that's way mature beyond his years, and he's had some life experiences that make him really unique. The biggest thing is, for me, his leadership on the field. Like we saw with D'Amico in that mic'd up segment where D'Amico asks him where he's going to be a defensive coordinator. He doesn't want to lose him to being a defensive coordinator. That has come up huge so many times. Going back to that goal line stand against the Jaguars, Azeez told the D-line exactly what was coming, changed their alignments a little bit. There was a play in the game last week where Azeez adjusted to an offensive adjustment, then the offense adjusted again, and Azeez adjusted again, and they stuffed the run because of it. That kind of stuff, that on-field leadership in the playoffs, that's huge. The other guy, the guy who is a different personality than Azeez, but I think just by virtue of his play, who shows up in the playoffs we've seen now is Nico Collins.
Yeah.
I think the fact that Nico has put in some of his best performances in the playoffs, and last week when on that 99-yard touchdown drive, there was 3 receptions by Nico on that drive, including the touchdown play.
Yeah.
There's a certain strength in Nico in the playoffs that I think is just gonna. It's a rock solid foundation. I think that's who he is.
And I would count that Week 18 game against the Colts last year, which was his biggest game. That to me counts as a playoff game.
The play-in game.
The play-in game. Yeah, absolutely. So Azeez Al-Shaair, the return of him, that's a big one. Number 2. CJ's newly found magic legs. This whole wrinkle that was unlocked in the late second quarter of Saturday's game and was used a few times in the second half. CJ running the football and needing to be accounted for at least in some way. Here was Steve Spagnuolo, the defensive coordinator for the Chiefs, talking about CJ's running ability.
I was very impressed with him. I told him that after the game last time we played him. For young guys, so talented. And we all saw what he did last week with his feet. You know, I think when the importance of these games keep amping up, you can expect quarterbacks to say, hey, I might have to run it here. And so we've talked extensively about, trying to bottle this quarterback up, because we saw last week what he can do when he decides to run it. It's like all these backs play in this league now. It brings a whole nother dimension, and you got to figure out ways to, whether you commit one guy to the quarterback, turn 3 loose, however you do it, you got to have ways to do it. Now, that being said, we got to get him in those situations. I mean, it's first and second down, and they're on schedule. That makes it really tough. When a quarterback takes off on a first and second down, run pass call, and it ends up passing, he's going. that's challenging.
CJ's name getting dropped in with all the athletic quarterbacks. I didn't see that.
I know,
coming.
yeah.
It's kind of cool.
We were wondering if maybe CJ is more athletic than we want to give him credit for, mostly just because he's duck-footed.
Yeah.
And a lot of times when guys are duck-footed, when you watch them walking around and everything, you're like, I don't know about this guy.
Yeah.
But he does. When he pulls it down and runs, he only needs to be as athletic as Pat Mahomes, it's as much about his choice of when to run and, in which situations matters more than anything else. Pat Mahomes ran a 4.8 40.
Yeah.
He's athletic enough.
Yeah.
And with CJ, that's all it is. He's athletic enough. The one thing that I found really interesting this week when CJ talked about it was that he had said, I want to, I'll paraphrase. He said, I feel like I am a really good pocket passer. I want to be an elite pocket passer. And yes, that's true. But in the modern NFL, man, nobody is going to mark you down for running like Pat Mahomes. Man, nobody second guesses whether or not Pat Mahomes is a good pocket quarterback.
Right.
He just takes the easy opportunities. And then because you take those easy opportunities, yes, they help in the moment, but it really does open up the passing game for a couple reasons. That if they have to commit a guy on defense to keep an eye on you and stay in the center of the field, that opens everything up over the outside. It keeps guys in coverage a little further back, so you've got more openings over the middle in the quick game. And then the nature and the way in which you run the ball, Pat Mahomes does it perfectly. He just runs straight ahead. Yeah. And CJ did that a couple times in the game, because that's what really stresses out a defense. If you're rolling to the sideline, you can make some things happen, but in some ways it makes it easier for the coverage.
Yeah.
When the quarterback escapes up the middle, he's got 50 yards of space with which to work, and in coverage, if he's moving towards the line of scrimmage, the guys in coverage have to make that decision of like, all right, do I come up and meet the quarterback at the line of scrimmage, or do I stay in coverage? So it wasn't just the fact that he ran, it was the nature of his runs where he threatens the defense a lot.
Yeah,
more.
and I think the big thing too on that, Seth, is third down. Like this team, they're lacking weapons right now. They've had trouble on third down in the second half of the season. If CJ's more willing on a 3rd and 7 to tuck it and go, that's one more way they can keep the chains moving in this game.
Real quick,
Yeah.
Another reason to hate the Chiefs. I think we're up to 9 or 10 now.
Yeah.
Spags was obviously tampering there. I feel like if any team other than the Chiefs were to do that, they would have been hit with a tamp. The way I understand it, It seems like anytime a head coach compliments a player from another team, it's tampering.
Yeah.
So he goes up to CJ, says, "I admire your work." It's just laying the groundwork for if Spags gets a head coaching job somewhere.
Tampering.
Cheater.
Yeah.
Remember he called that a legal timeout earlier in the year that wasn't flagged?
Greasy mitts off our quarterback. All right.
Send that over to Ron.
Hughley?
Yeah, Hughley. Yeah. Evidence of their cheating.
Number 3, Chris Jones. Chris Jones, I'm assuming fully healthy. He got hurt in the Texans game. Hasn't played since then. Chris Jones versus the interior of this offensive line, Seth, is kind of a big deal.
Okay, here's the thing, though, Sean. It's not just Chris Jones versus the interior offensive line. Chris Jones had his way with Blake Fisher a couple times. Chris Jones bull rushed Laramie Tunsil like Laramie was a prepubescent 7th grader right down there at the end of the game. I believe that was on the 3rd down that pretty much sealed the game for the Chiefs. Because Chris Jones can line up all over the place, the Texans have to sometimes alter their protection to address it. And then Spagnuolo's really good at calling blitzes to the other side, changing things up to screw. So in a way, they use Chris Jones to dictate pass protection. And that's the big cat and mouse game that's tricky for Bobby, because he can't just do what he was doing early in the year, which is like do a full slide protection to wherever the biggest threat is, because they're going to get duped with something like that. That's the chess match between Spagnuolo and Bobby Slowick this week that's really interesting.
Yep. Number 4, got to run the football. And we'll see what this Joe Mixon ankle injury is. Hopefully it's the team just be cautious. He didn't seem to be acting like a guy with an ankle injury in the locker room after the game. He was smoking a gigantic cigar and screaming at Rex Ryan. But so we don't know what this is.
Called Rex Ryan that boy. That boy said it was a bye week.
Rex Ryan bye week, Pat. Yep. But they're going to have to run the football in this game. The weapons in the pass game, Seth. It's Nico Collins, as you pointed out, who's outstanding, and then it's a bunch of guys who I don't know that they'd get on the field for the Kansas City Chiefs after that. Like that's the drop off. The way you're going to get some of these guys open, I think, is to be able to line up and run the football. They were able to do that at the end of the Chargers game. That's the one thing I feel okay about with the offense is that we're not asking them to do anything that we haven't at least seen glimpses of recently here, either in Week 18 or in the Charger game. Like, do that again. Like that last drive where they ran it 13 straight times. They don't have to run the ball great, but they have to be credible running the football. And, So
and that's where again. It helps if there's any more respect or thought this week on the Chiefs' behalf of, okay, well, you know what, they're probably going to really they're going to take advantage of opportunities that when CJ runs, we got to be cognizant of that. That if that's part of the run game, then so be it. That's nice. Yeah, all use all your available resources. Joe Mixon, Dameon Pierce, perhaps.
Yeah.
I mean, that's. If Joe Mixon's ankle is a little banged up or really banged up, that Dameon Pierce Titans game is looming large in my mind as a factor for how you manage this.
Great. All right, fifth one. The battle between what's worse, being off for 24 days and the rust that accumulates, or being a dome team that's playing in what's probably a kickoff going to be closer to like temperatures in the mid-20s or low 20s, kicking off late in the day. The high tomorrow in Kansas City is in the low 30s. I mean, it's going to be dark outside by the time the second half rolls around in this game. Oh,
yeah, it will be a night game, basically.
The second half of this game. So which of those sort of non-X's and O's themes shows itself more in this game?
Pat Mahomes will have set a record if he starts this game. If he starts. For longest layoff by a starting quarterback before the playoffs. He'll break Warren Moon's record. We'll get to a little bit more on that later.
Yeah.
The Chiefs are very good after bye weeks or with extra rest, but this is a long one. And Chris Jones and pretty much all the rest of the notable starters haven't played in a long, long time.
Yeah.
So we'll see. Hopefully it does make it. And you got to spring it on them in the first quarter.
Yes.
If it takes those guys a couple series to kind of get their reaction time back and to get into the rhythm of the game, spring it all in the put stress on their brains and on their nervous system and in their reaction time in that very first couple of series.
If you win the toss, do you take the ball or do you defer to the second half?
I say yes.
Okay. Either one.
Oh, you gave me an either or, and I said yes.
Yeah.
I would say I say take the ball.
Take the ball?
Take the fight to him immediately.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Analytics don't do that, but like what you're talking about, the Texans are a good offensive team in the first quarter. The Chiefs are a rusty team. I think there's a case to be made to take the ball in this game.
Sean, part of my math learning disability that we talked about earlier is that I selectively choose to pay attention to the analytics.
I got you.
Okay?
Smart.
Depending on how my gut feel is, I either agree with it because I'm smart, or I disagree with it because I know football. You didn't play the game.
Right. No, that's good for radio. You're not an engineer. If you were an engineer and you were doing that, I'd be really worried, like building bridges and stuff.
Yeah. Let's really lean into you didn't play the game today.
We pick the engineer that uses math some of the time.
I want to be the engineer that says you didn't play the game.
All right, hey.
You've never driven over that bridge that goes over the ship channel.
Right.
You don't know what it's like.
Right. Real quick, my prediction, Seth will give his in the 9 o'clock hour. F it. Texans 24, Chiefs 23.
Oh, I can't believe the Chiefs blew this game.
When am I going to get a chance to do this again anytime soon? Texans 24, Chiefs 23. Come at me. All right, that's your six-pack for the game.